some additional information on how this team thing works.
So everything Deanna's been talking about from the sound clarity perspective is down in this section of dialing into the sound. It's about dialing into the sound is really about getting your executive leadership team and ultimately your entire company into a place where they're hearing each other, where they're trusting each other, where they're truly vulnerable. And vulnerability is not a word that you hear very often in corporations, but we need to start changing that. As Americans, we need to become amazingly more vulnerable at work so that we can fix our problems, not so that we can be touchy-feely. I don't give a crap about being sweet and nice and touchy-feely in organizations. What I do care about is that we start fixing our problems. And what I'm suggesting is the way to fix our problems is to get vulnerable to where I'm very comfortable sharing with you everything that I'm thinking. Things that are good, things that are needing improvement. If I'm thinking it, I need to be saying it. Did you hear that? If I'm thinking something, even though we're Southerners, I need to be saying it. Okay? And the process that we go through with the 9 ground rules of cohesive team behavior actually get you to where you are free enough to say everything you're thinking. True? Within the context of 9 ground rules, thank you for saying that, because it doesn't mean that if I'm thinking you are an idiot, that I say that. What it does mean, thank you for including that in, Roger, is that if I'm thinking you are an idiot, then I need to pick up the 9 ground rules, walk through the process, and get to the true frustration that I have that does need to be said. There is a real thing that needs to be said without condemnation, without the disrespect that's in there, and the ground rules help filter out that disrespect to be able to get you to say everything that really needs to be said. Okay, so as an exercise, I want you all talking for a minute, for 2 minutes, to the person next to you about what is one work-related issue that you have complained about in the past week. I want it to be about a person. I want it to be very specific. Something that you complained about, and even if you are the silent type, don't talk to anybody, something that frustrated you. And it's already Wednesday, so surely there's like 45 things that you've been frustrated about. So spend 2 minutes talking to the person next to you about something you were frustrated about. Okay, now that you've got a frustration that is prime on your brain, and let me remind you that I would assume this is just the one thing that you're talking about, and there were probably more like, it's Wednesday, so probably more like 15 things that you've been frustrated by, usually people related, someone who wasn't doing their job, someone that is blocking your progress from your perspective. Let's look at ground rule 1. What we want you to do is every time you feel any frustration at work, let that frustration be a trigger for you to pick up your ground rules. I'm going to pass out the sheet of ground rules in a little bit. So, frustration. Oh, I can't believe that person didn't. Wait a minute. That's a clue. I need to pick up the ground rules. You heard Roger say that that's exactly what he did twice yesterday. At least twice yesterday. And it's not just this little, oh yeah, check a box, let's make sure okay, run through the list. No, this is your answer to resolving your problem. Truly getting it resolved. Not just the one you talked about a minute ago, every one you have throughout the day. And what's ground rule 1? No complaining at all until you're willing to take action. This is not saying suppress your complaint. Be sweet, be nice. Not at all what we're saying. What we're saying is that thing that you're frustrated by is a valid frustration. It is something that the world will be a better place, our company will make more money, our customers will be happier if this frustration was solved. So what am I going to do to get it solved? Instead of complaining about it, instead of talking to my neighbor about it, I am not going to talk to my neighbor about it. Instead, I'm going to figure out what I need to do to get it resolved. Every problem, even problems that you don't have authority to fix, even problems that are in someone else's character that are frustrating you, what are you going to do? Here's the thing. You're the one who's frustrated. And so you're the one who is in the best motivated position to figure out what to do. On every frustration that you have, it's your responsibility to solve it. If you're waiting for somebody else to figure it out, if you're waiting for somebody else to finally care enough, they're not going to, most likely. But you are frustrated. That's good. That means you have a driving motivator to bring it to conclusion. And so every frustration that you see, I want you to think about a flag that you are picking up and saying, writing your complaint on the flag and saying, I am going to hold this flag and not put it down until I have resolved the problem. Not until he's resolved the problem. I'm not going to give him my flag and say, here, go fix this. It's my frustration, so it's my flag, and I don't get to put it down until I have fixed it. And you say, but I don't have the authority to fix it. I don't have the tools to fix it. What else are you going to do to get it resolved? And what I have found is that about 25% of my problems, if I will just stop, when I'm frustrated, just stop and say, what can I do? Is there anything new I can think of to do to resolve this? About 25% of my problems, with 15 minutes of internal brainstorming, I can figure something out that I wasn't thinking of before. Something that I was waiting for somebody else to do, I can figure out what I can do and just get it fixed. For about 25% of my problems. And that's kind of a small percentage. It's an amazing number of problems that I can just fix. But that leaves about 75% of my problems where I need somebody else. I need more input. And I need to figure out how to engage those people on my behalf, because I'm not going to give them my flag. I'm keeping the flag. But I somehow need to engage them differently than I am. How can I do that? When I need others, that leads us to ground rules 2. 9. We'll say all 9. Okay? And we're not going to go over all 9 in detail, but I will talk about just 2 and 3 really quickly. How to engage others. Ground rule 2 is blame the process, not the person, which really says this thing I'm frustrated about where I know that, Dennis, you're causing my problem. Ground rule 2 says that I need to consider, first of all, that you're not to blame. I don't know whether you are to blame. I probably don't have enough information. The reality is that you're doing what you're doing because it's working for you. It's working in your world. And I need to find out why you're doing what you're doing. I need to seek, Stephen Covey, seek first to understand, then be understood. Instead of getting frustrated with you, I need to go and talk to you and say, can you explain to me why you're doing what you're doing? I need to question my own virtue of me being right and you being stupid. And say, maybe I don't have enough information. Maybe I need to realize that there are more constraints in the world than just my own. Question your own virtue. Blame the process, not the person, is number 2. Once you get your head right about this situation, ground rule number 3 says, respect everybody on the team, assuming good motives. And it really says even more than that. It says to highly regard that person that you're frustrated with. Not so that we are touchy-feely. Not so that we all get along and are nice and sweet in our workplace. I don't care about that. What I care about is you fixing your frustration. And I am here to tell you a revelatory thing. That the way you fix almost every frustration that you have, where you need somebody else, is to care about that person. Care about their needs as much as you care about your own needs. Not so that we are sweet and get along, but so that your problem gets fixed. Why does that person not care about your needs? Well, because he's centered on his own needs. If you start centering on his needs as much as you are on your own needs, that person says, wow, you're trying to help me out. Okay, I'll let you help me out. Now, okay, what do you need? And now all of a sudden this person is engaged in helping your frustration because you have first cared about them. Highly regarded. Assume good motives from them. This is absolutely effective. Your problems, if you want to fix your problems, do this. If you want to bitch about your problems, that's fine too, but just know that you're not going to get them solved. If you want to fix them, do this. Take total responsibility of the problem yourself, ground rule 1. Ground rule 2, no longer believe that you're right and they're stupid. Question your own virtue. And ground rule 3, care about their needs in order to fix your problems. The rest of the 9 ground rules help you take it the rest of the way to conclusion for every frustration you have. And when you start living this way, I'm not saying when your corporation starts living this way, here's a caution. Don't go home back to your offices today. In fact, don't even sit in your chair and say, oh my gosh, my company so needs to hear this. If everybody else would all start living this way, it would sure be better. Yes, while that's true, the real problem is that you're not living this way. And you think you are, because we all think that we're righteous and everybody else sucks. But the reality is we're all pretty close to the same. Okay? And you are not caring about people enough for them to get engaged into your problems. So the answer is you, individually, going back and starting to live this way. And when you do, your own personal noise will vanish. Not reduced by 20%. It just goes away when you start living this way. Revelatory. Okay? And I'll pass out the 9 ground rules that you can have at the end. Yeah, Jay?
So are you advocating turning the other cheek once you do assume they have good motives and they prove you wrong?
Not exactly.
Okay.
Ballpark maybe, but this is not about becoming a doormat and letting, just say, well, it's okay, I'm going to care about them and I'll just deal with my frustration. This is about you fixing your frustration. And the way to fix your frustration is first to show that person that you've got their back, that you want them to win. And when you want them to win, that also frees you to be able to speak the truth, which is getting down to ground rule 5, to say exactly what you're thinking. So remember a while ago when I said we're Southerners and it's so nice, we're so used to just not saying everything that we're thinking. I think this, but I say something way different because if I said what I was thinking, you would realize that I think you're a horrible, evil person.
Like bless your heart.
Bless your heart. Exactly. Exactly. And instead, what we're suggesting is when I'm frustrated, walk through the ground rules. What do the ground rules tell me to do? It says, okay, this is my problem. It's not your problem to resolve. This is my problem. Ground rule 1. Ground rule 2. Maybe I'm not the essence of righteousness that I think I am. Question your own virtue. Ground rule 2. Blame the process, not the person. It's not them who's at fault. Ground rule 3 is, okay, this person, I just want to bite their head off, but instead, I'm going to choose to care about them. I'm going to choose to hear what their needs are. Assume good motives from them. Respect them highly, highly. Not just a little bit, not just like, okay, yeah, okay, we're all people and I'm with you. No, I'm actually going to care about you so that you know that I've got your back, that I'm on your team. 4th is that I'm going to go to you with my frustration, not to my neighbor, not to my wife, but to you because you're who I'm frustrated with, and I'm going to emphasize my high regard for you while I'm coming. But ground rule number 5 is that I'm still going to tell you what I'm thinking. And what I'm thinking is no longer that you're a stupid idiot, horrible, evil person because I've run it through the ground rules and gotten high regard for you, but still that I have a valid frustration. And I'm going to share that valid frustration and not just be walked on, not just turn the other cheek. I'm actually going to get my problems resolved by caring about your problems too and making sure that in the process of fixing my problems, I'm not just handing you new problems. I'm making sure that we create new solutions that work for both of us and meet all of our needs. And when you do this, your noise goes away. Okay? But that's not the whole picture. Because now, let's say you've gone through the process and you personally have changed, and then somehow through major feats we were able to deploy it through the whole organization, and everybody starts acting this way. Our noise is gone. But that leaves silence, kind of like what Roger's vice president said, after we fixed our noise by having revelation on how to live this way. Noise vanished, and he went back to work the next week and said, I didn't have anything to do because my whole job was being puppet master of the noise. What do I do now? Thankfully, we had just gone through the rest of the process and helped him get in touch with the corporate sound, which is, why do they exist? To help everyone pursue what they love. Okay? How can I, Robert, the senior vice president of KiZAN, make that happen in our company, for our clients? Pursue what you love. How can I, Robert, pursue what I love while I'm here? Getting them deeply in touch with that sound. A strategy for success on that sound. So let's very quickly, I've only got maybe 5 more minutes, so let's talk about the rest of this. Discerning the sound. Ooh, can't really see that. Discerning the sound is knowing who you are as an organization by answering these 3 questions. Why do we exist? Which is, how are we making the world a better place? What do we do? A simple explanation of the business. As KiZAN, we, I'm not going to get it exactly right, Microsoft Solutions provider for the Central Region, something like that. Okay? What do we value? These are our core values, 3 core values that exude through every action that we have in this company. Okay? When you get in touch with this, what this picture is, can you see it at all? This is Lion King, this is Simba looking into the pond, seeing his reflection and realizing that he actually looks like his dad, Mufasa. So he was Simba, the lion cub, running around the jungle singing Hakuna Matata until he saw his reflection in the pool and realized, I'm actually supposed to be king of the jungle. I'm supposed to be more. I am the lion, but I'm supposed to be more of what I am. When you get in touch with this right here, why we exist, what do we do, what do we value, you actually use the answers to these questions how many times per day?
A lot.
Every question that Roger gets asked in the company. Should we do this or should we do that? Should I spend my time on this or that? He pulls up what we call the echo, which is the answer to these questions. And he lets these words, what do we value, our core values, strive for excellence.
We do what is right.
We do what is right.
We do whatever it takes in love.
We do whatever it takes in love. Oh, Mike has their echo with him because he carries it with him laminated everywhere he
I'll
goes.
spill coffee on it. No.
And what that does is you become more of these core values. You already are these core values because they're innate to you. But once you use it every minute for every question, you become that in every single situation, not just 60% of the time with your best clients, but all the time. You become those core values. That's a sound. That's awesome. So some examples of why we exist. My company's reason we exist is to help our clients find joy and purpose in doing work. In the work they do, we want them to just, wow, I love being here because it makes me joyful and have deep purpose in being here. Has that happened?
Yeah.
Sweet. So when we are at our best, we help accomplish this for our clients. Deanna's been through this process, her company, People Strategy Consulting. They exist. We are a catalyst for igniting the passion and performance of leaders and people for organizational excellence and success. Wow, that's good. That's a good reason to exist. They are making the world a better place by doing that. A couple other clients. KiZAN, we've already said, we exist to enable everyone to pursue what they love. Their clients don't like technology. They like doing what they're set up to do. And so KiZAN comes in and does the technology nastiness for them because they love doing it. The client hates doing it. So they're enabling their clients to pursue what they love. Internally, KiZAN does this. They put people in positions that they will love. If you're in a position that you don't love, they do something about it every time because that is the reason they exist. One more client of mine, KiZAN implements a farm implement company that sells combines and tractors in Iowa. When I first asked them, why do you exist? They said, to sell combines and tractors. And after talking to them a little bit more, they realized the reason they exist is they thrive to be stewards of the land, of hard work, and of reverence for the American farmer who feeds the world. What farmer doesn't want to go buy a combine from them when they walk into the store and feel like this just happened? Okay, I'm a farmer, I need a combine, I go into KiZAN and they revere me because I help feed the world. That's not just a marketing phrase, it's who you are. It's the reason you exist as a people. Okay? These are powerful comments, and I don't create these. I'm not a marketing consultant. You go to Brad and Chad for marketing. I find out what is already your reason for existing. What is the pulse that's already beating inside of you? And we get to these comments, that they get to these comments through the process. That's a sound. Okay? Next step in the process is developing this sound into a roadmap for success by asking these questions: how will we succeed? What is most important right now? And who must do what roles and responsibilities? And we put these on an echo. That's a sheet of paper that Mike just showed you laminated. It's the answer to those 6 questions that you carry with you everywhere you go. And every time somebody comes up in your company, customers, staff, colleagues, bosses, and says, how should I do this? You pull out the echo. You say, oh, our core value says we are personally accountable. Therefore, my answer to you is this. Because we are personally accountable, that's one of our core values, my answer is this. And you use those exact words for the echo. What that also does, you distribute this to everybody in the company so that everybody in the company has the answer to the 6 questions. So that every time anybody in the company has a question and says, I don't know whether I should do this or this, instead of running to the boss, they pull out their echo and say, well, I know my boss is just going to pull out his echo. Why don't I do that first and see if I can answer my own question without having to go to him first? Good stuff. Okay. And the last step is deployment. Deployment is over-communicating the answer to these questions and the 9 ground rules to everybody in the company, and we help with the rollout plan. But it's also about aligning your processes with your human systems. These answers to your processes and your human systems. And by human systems, I mean hiring practices, I mean reward structure, compensation, firing practices, that those human systems are flooded with the answers from the sound. Make sure that they're very, very consistent and that you're over-communicating this every day. Again, Roger, how many times do you mention the echo to somebody in your company, some answer from the question to somebody in the company?
Multiple times a day.
Many, many, many times per day. You're over-communicating it. In Lencioni's book, he says, if you haven't communicated something 7 times, then people aren't going to hear it because they hear so many messages from you. How do they know which one is important? Everything's important. How do I know what to do? So he says at least 7 times. If you haven't said it 7 times, they don't believe you. What we say is, if you haven't done it 7 times a day, for the life of the company, then you're really not believing your own echo. So it's all the time. You flood the company with the answer to these questions. And that's a sound. And what Lencioni says, what Roger has found to be true, what all of my clients, what I've found to be true in my own company, is when you get clear on the answer to these questions, people that share your values flock to you. Both candidates you want to recruit, clients you want to sell to, when you get clear on your core values, those who share them just come running. It's worth being here. Okay, so we're done. I was supposed to be on this slide the whole time I was talking about that. So don't send mixed messages, send very consistent messages. So Deanna and I are strategic partners along with the rest of the people in EST, and we help implement this whole process. And so I think next is a Q&A for the three of us. So if you've got any questions to any of us about how this process works, about how you live by ground rules, about the 5 dysfunctions of a team, feel free.
Alan, for the sake of all, the 9 ground rules that you developed came from Mount Sinai, right? But seriously, if you could talk a little bit about how you evolved those
Sure.
ground rules.
When I first started the company, my history had been as an IT project manager, and so I started the business as an IT project management consulting firm. But on the very first project, we were called in to an insurance company, to their accounting department, which was experiencing immense chaos, and they said, please come in and just tell us why it's chaotic. And the answer was people issues, that people weren't talking to each other. They had conference rooms that were 100% of every day empty. People were blaming each other. People weren't talking across departments. And so, thankfully, I've been reading a lot of books, and books such as Leadership and Self-Deception, Success Principles by Jack Canfield, Jim Collins' Good to Great, Bible certainly is what you're referring to with Mount Sinai. They are somewhat biblically based ground rules. And I just developed these ground rules as to what that project needed. It went so well that we've really just taken them to every project that we've ever gone to, and they've kind of become the cornerstone of what we do.
I just want to make one comment about the ground rules. In our history of working with teams, many times we would ask the team to start with, what are the basic ground rules we're going to use in order to work through this project or this session. The difference is those ground rules are good for that particular situation. Then what we found, except there's only one company in my career that I saw had ground rules laminated in every conference room. And I think the difference is when Alan shares you these 9 ground rules, is these are consistent. These are things that we practice every day. And you may have had the experience of being on a project, and let's start with ground rules. We make them, and then, it hangs up there for the length of the project, but it doesn't continue on and become part of the culture of the organization. And that's the difference.
I'll say these work at home too, and they need to work at home as well. They apply to life.
Well, how big was your management team? How big was the company, and how many people left?
The company's 74 employees today. My leadership team that we went through with Alan was 5. We've added a 6th member. And how many?
Like what?
None yet.
And I will talk to that a little about skepticism, that it is perfectly natural for people in a company to be deeply skeptical about any initiative that's going on, especially a culture initiative that might be going on in the company. Like, for instance, mergers and acquisitions, an enormous percentage of them fail because of the inability to join cultures. And so people should be skeptical that this is going to work. And when we started with your company, there were multiple people I interviewed that said, nothing will ever change here. It has been done 45 times and nothing will change. And one person in particular who said that has totally bought into this process since then. He came to training 3 times. It took him a while to come to training. I mean, to really say, no, okay, I see that, and I will say, one of the primary reasons that person was able to say, I believe maybe something is different, is because this man right here became different. He started living way high care, And the guy was impressed and said, my gosh, maybe there is something different here.
I will say that the biggest challenge is dealing with people who don't know 9 ground rules or deal with 9 ground rules, and that was very frustrating for me when we came out of the training, and one of the reasons why we did it very fast, the deployment throughout the company, because that next week I was dealing with, I think that same person, he was complaining, well, what else can we do about that? What else can we do about that? What else? And we spent a half an hour, and he gave up, and like, well, I hear you complain, I can help you with that, but you need to decide what you're going to do about that as well. And that's one reason why we rolled forward with it. Now we're dealing with customers. Well, with a lot of our kickoff meetings, we pull out 9 ground rules, and by the way, this is the way we're going to engage with you. And customers are responding very favorably to that. Follow the wagon.
But what he's also talking about is ground rule 9. I think most of you have it in front of you. Ground rule 9 is, what do I do when I see others not living by the ground rules? And even when I first created the ground rules, my temptation of my own employees, who I would catch violating the ground rule, I would say, you're not living by ground rule 3. And she would look back at me and say, you're not living by ground rule 2. Because I was blaming her for violating the ground rule. And what ground rule 9 is really all about is saying, hey, this is understandable that we're human. That, like Roger just said, we fail, even in living by the ground rules. But what ground rule 9 is about is saying, I am committed to living this way, recognizing that I'm not perfect, and as soon as you see me not being perfect, just call me on it, and I'm right back in to the ground rules. And I will do the same with you. And this is what Roger's talking about. When he sees other people not living by the ground rules, it's not his job to blame them for complaining or for whatever violation of the ground rule. It's his job to just walk them back into the ground rules. To say, how can I help you do ground rule 1? Own that complaint of yours. How can I then help you not believe that you're right and everybody else is wrong? Ground rule 2. How can I then help you have really high regard for that person that you're frustrated with, even if that person is me? How can I help you have high regard for me in the middle of this? It's his job to walk the rest of his company through living by the ground rules. That's ground rule 9.
I know we had a couple more questions. They got yours? Okay.
I have a question for you, Roger, about how you brought this change to your organization. So I'm leading a similar change with our leadership team, and I think what would be the equivalent of your direct reports are bought in that this kind of an exercise is needed. How did you get brought along in this process? Because ultimately, there's no one can lead that without the senior leaders'
Sure.
support and driving.
As part of the rollout plan that we created with Alan, there was the core leadership team. We brought in that next level, and there were a couple of smaller groups who I invited Alan to come in and work with them initially, because there were teams, they were dysfunctional, they were involved in some critical projects, and they didn't start calling the 9 ground rules based on what I was hearing from different members of the team. That was going to fail, so I got Alan involved in that team initially, and they didn't meet my home because my wife was a part of that team. And one of the other challenges we had, when I went back to the leadership team, I told people, I'm an addict and I live in a crack house. My wife is one of the major people, and she and I would complain a lot alike and a lot to each other, and we're falling into the ground rules at all. But anyway, to answer your question, so we did the next circle, and then we took the teams and we went through a training with them, and they were all-day sessions. We do the training half a day, and they came back in another half a day, and we just dived into it.
But was it your, did you recognize, hey, this is a problem and I'm looking for a solution and kind of a roadmap to change our
But
organization?
before our retreat, how did you get convinced that you needed to do that?
Well, Mike brought Alan in, and we spent, I think probably less than an hour together, and said, yes, we need to do this, because we had a good culture, things were not working, there was a lot of noise, I was not frustrated, and I was certainly hopeful that this would help. I walked in anticipating it was going to be painful, but at the same time, given some of that personal experience we talked about, I was very open to it, and vulnerable to time.
Do you remember the first thing you ever said to me?
No.
And this is hopefully to answer your question a little bit. Mike is who I first talked to. He had heard me on a radio show, and he had talked me up in the process so highly to Roger that when I first walked in, Roger said something like, I thought you would be wearing a robe and a halo, or based on how he had, so really the champion in the company just said, I am totally bought into the process. I think this is what we need. And then in our first conversation, every conversation I have with the CEO, it always starts with noise. Noise resonates because any CEO has it, and it's strong. And yet the noise that you, as a staff person, might bring to them sounds very different, right? Your noise is that Dilbert level noise, probably, and you go talk to him about your Dilbert level noise, and he's going to say, that's not my problem. My problem is all the bang your head noise, all these other things that I'm experiencing. And so I just talked to him about his noise, and in that very first conversation, I also say, ground rule one is you're causing your own noise. And I, in a very non-accusational way, accusing way, I lead them in the first sales call through the process of the kind of maturity and humility and bravery that it would take to fix his own noise.
I think that's a really important point, because I understand what you're saying. You know, for how do you get your executives, the top people, to embrace this? And unless they recognize they have a problem, and I think Alan uses the term, what is their noise? If they can define that, because sometimes it's as simple as, are you getting what you need out of your CFO? No, you should hear me about what he has a problem with. Are you getting business results that exceed your expectations? Absolutely not. We're like 10% below each time at this 20%. Those are the types of things that people begin to say. I think the executives actually hone in on what the issues are. You know, we know that people at the top don't fail because they don't know business. They do. Where they fail is because they don't have these relationships built and this kind of clarity about the goals as they move forwards. And it's their responsibility to be sure that the whole organization understands that it's cascading down. But just go back to that, fish sticks from the head down. You know, and I just really encourage you to even share some of this information with some of the senior people who might be upset at whatever issue it is, and say, so what are we doing wrong? Because in business, we don't really have to deal a lot, we think, with the human element. And that's the fallacy. And that's the mistake that we kind of bring to light with this process.
I'm just going to expand upon your question of why did I champion Alan so hard? I had heard him this much on a radio show. I thought, well, I'll go spend 30 minutes with Alan just to understand more about his business. And about 3 hours later, I was convinced. And it wasn't because, it was really, he asked me a lot of questions. And if you think about where we were at the time that we spoke, we were coming off of winning Microsoft Heartland Partner of the Year. So all Heartland, we were winning awards, growth. I mean, we were great. Things were great, but not as great as they could be. There was still noise. It still felt something, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I didn't understand all of the reasons why we were dealing with some of the stuff we were dealing with, even though we were being very successful. And only after speaking with Alan did we start aligning the 9 ground rules. Well, do you have this? Do you have that? And we got to the end of that, and I'm like, man, that is us. And he goes, that's everybody. It's not just you, it's everybody. And because we're human, this is how it works. And so I just felt after that discussion that we weren't alone, that there was ways to do things better. And introducing him to Roger was a very fast meeting. I mean, we had agreement within, I think, 30 minutes that we're doing something, right?
Yeah.
So.
I think we want to honor the time commitment. Those of you that have other commitments have to leave at 10, but we're more than happy to stay and answer individual questions. Is there anybody else before, the group?
I have one more.
Question?
So what, I mean, you don't get buy-in, right? I mean, you take this back and you've got a project that you're involved in and you're a piece of it, but you don't have buy-in and you start living some of these principles and kind of abiding by this yourself, and it has an impact on people. But what are the pitfalls of that? I mean, is there anything that you would say about that process? Because, I mean, obviously, if you take something away from this and you think it's going to help and you start living it without being able to sell it to the executive leadership, can you still have an impact, and what are your risks?
What we tell our prospects is, anybody who comes to our seminar, is you start living this way. And don't go tell everybody else at your company that this is what we need to do. You start living this way. And you're not. I know probably 2/3 of the room thinks that, oh, well, but I'm living this way. It's all those other people out there. It's probably you all that aren't living this way as well. Doesn't mean you're bad people, it means you're people. Okay? It means that we all just let triangulation or any other complaints come out of our mouth and not say, what am I going to do to live this way? And so I suggest you live this way. And then after an extended time, you're going to see that you get to fix your problems that you were not fixing before. And then, after an extended time, you go introduce something to your management. They're going to say, well, I've certainly seen a difference in you because I feel supported by you for the first time, right? Because you, if you're living this way, you're thinking of ground rule 3 toward them, which is high regard toward them. They're going to notice that something's different. So that's your entrance, is after you've been living this way. And then also just come talk to us, and we can help set up the right meeting with the CEO.